Hello everyone, Ian Wishart here, and it is my pleasure as always to welcome you to the latest edition of the Take a Pew podcast. And naturally, I'm joined as always by the latest edition of Mr. Simon Clark.
Yes, hello listeners, it's me. But Ian, I don't wish to be picky. After all, pedanticism is usually your speciality.
Pedantry?
What?
It's pedantry, not pedanticism.
Okay, and with that, I rest my case. But my point is, when you say that this is the latest edition of the podcast, it may not, in fact, be the latest edition by the time some people get to listen to it. So...
Yeah, well, I guess strictly speaking, you are correct, but I think that plumbs depths of pedantry that even I wouldn't sink to.
I think you meant to say to which even I wouldn't sink. Don't end a sentence on a preposition.
Okay, it's a fair cop. But look, I think next time we should perhaps just say hello and get on with it and avoid this rather tortuous academic minefield.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, get on with it then.
Right, welcome again, dear listener, to possibly one of the more recent episodes of the Take a Pew podcast. And our guest this time is a very nice young man by the name of Andy Kind.
Yes, now Andy is a comedian and a preacher.
Which he has rather cleverly combined and describes himself as a creature.
No, mate, it's a promedian.
Oh yeah, sorry. Anyway, Andy has been plying the stand-up comedy trade for approximately 18 years, 2 months and 2 days. And is now indeed also pursuing the path of an itinerant preacher, alongside being a writer and an evangelist.
Oh, another busy boy then.
Well, it certainly seems so. But let's find out all about it. This is the Take a Pew podcast with Andy Kind.
Andy Kind.
Take a pew.
And here we are in the glorious Staffordshire town of Newcastle under Lyme, in the area known as the Potteries on account of its ceramic-making heritage. And bordering on Stoke-on-Trent, the erstwhile home of such unlikely bedfellows as Anthea Turner off of the telly, Sir Stanley Matthews off of the football, and Slash off of the Guns N' Roses. But far more interestingly than that, it brings us to the home of today's guest, Mr. Andy Kind. Andy, welcome to the show, and please take a pew.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hello, Dave. Do you mind if I call you Dave?
You can call me whatever you like, Simon.
Oh, well, let's stick with Andy. It's great to see you. Perhaps if you could just introduce yourself to our lovely listeners.
By all means, my name is Andy Kind, and you've described me very, very well indeed as a creature. I'm Andy Kind. I'm in my early 40s. I'm probably, biologically speaking, 42 years old. But on stage, I'm no more than 40. So it varies depending on how I'm feeling. And yes, I live here in Newcastle under Lyme. I have a very pleasant life. It's a bit like a fort, really, where you found me. I travel and I do my gigs from here, and then I come back and I look after my two daughters, Alice and Heidi, 10 and 7, and I write. And when the weather is nice, I will sit out in my garden and read and compile stories and things like that. But currently, predominantly a comedian, and I am writing books all the time. But I think calling oneself a writer feels a bit pretentious. I do like to be pretentious. I'm currently wearing a top hat, as you can see, so there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, primarily at the moment, post-pandemic, primarily a comedian.
Thanks, Andy. We are, as ever, excited to get the unique Take a Pew glimpse into your world, chatting about your journey in life so far, delving into some of your favourite things and enjoying a fabulous dinner party.
Yes, as well as benefiting from your sage counsel in Is It True? And of course your spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Amazing.
Yes, so let's get going. Where did life start for you, Andy? I understand that it was somewhere that smelled a little like a clarinet.
Well, life started... we're not a musical family at all. I was born in Birmingham in 1980. Spent the first 3 years of my life in Kidderminster. And then in 1983, my mum and dad moved to Newcastle under Lyme, where they still live. They're not in the loft of this house. But yeah, I moved with them as a 3-year-old. They decided it was best if they moved that I should go with them. So that was it.
So early life, Newcastle. I presume one is allowed to pronounce it Newcastle. This
Yeah,
Newcastle. You don't have to say Newcastle.
You don't have to. I mean, I say both. It's like Shrewsbury and Shrewsbury.
Yeah,
I mean, Shrewsbury's the gentrified version of it. Shrewsbury is what the locals would call it, I think. So everyone around here who's from Staffordshire would say Newcastle, but I have lived in different places, also went to private school, and also do gigs down south quite a lot. So I elongate my A's, or just in a terribly whimsical way, just willy-nilly. I can say Bath and Bath within the same conversation and just confuse people.
Quite a quixotic character, I
Yeah,
can say.
that's
But, so having settled here in Newcastle, you presumably had some education at some point. So we have our first question for you, and our first question is...
What were you like at school? Were you a little bit geeky? Or were you a little bit freaky? Or were you a little bit cheeky? What were you like at school?
Yes, Andy, what were you like at school?
I was quite a good boy at school, really. I was head boy at primary school and at secondary school.
La-di-da.
Yeah, I wasn't a geek at all. The only thing I've ever really geeked out on is football. I was a good boy. I was quite, I suppose, relatively bright academically without being a genius. I was always quite disruptive. The foundation was set for life, really. There's a reason I'm self-employed, is because I would be terrible in an office environment, because I'm constantly getting distracted by things and forming disparate ideas into new things. And that works for my job, but it doesn't work in terms of helping people to get on with their jobs. I was never the class clown, I don't think. I always enjoyed laughing and making people laugh.
Did you ever get into any serious trouble? That it was all just...
No, I copied some homework once and got in detention. But and then when I was in upper sixth, someone in the lower sixth, which was my sister's year, started saying some stuff about my sister, which wasn't totally uncomplimentary, but it wasn't appropriate either. And so I pinned him up against a fence. And there was a teacher called Mr. Gamble who saw it and said, "Oh, what do you think you're doing?" And I said, "I'm sorry, sir, but he just said something about my sister. I'm not going to accept that from anyone." And Mr. Gamble said, "Okay, well, don't do it again."
Don't make too much of a mess.
Yeah, exactly. I was never an angsty teenager either. I'd love to have a sort of harrowing backstory. It's actually been, the last few years that have been harrowing. I've got all my scars from the last few years, but I had a very, very happy childhood, quite a very easy upbringing. Mum and Dad just did everything to make sure that we had every opportunity to have a happy life.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a really fertile ground for our next question, which is...
What's your fondest childhood memory? What's your fondest of all your childhood memories? What's your fondest? Oh.
Yes, Andy. Of all your memories, the one little nugget that stands
well,
out.
I can tell you, but I've been thinking recently, actually, as you get older, there's only so much capacity your mind has for information. And so I found that my mind has started splicing different memories together to save disk space.
Right.
So that completely separate events are now tied together in my memory.
Very efficient.
For safekeeping. So I'll give you an example. In 1989-1990, Gordon Banks, England's World Cup winning goalkeeper in 1966, came into our school. His grandson Matthew was in our school and talked about being Gordon Banks, talked about playing in the World Cup, saving a header from Pelé, and that was fantastic. Later on that same year, the Reptile Man came into our primary school and showed us iguanas and allowed us to handle snakes and things. Logically, rationally, I know that those are two completely separate events. But because of my mind's necessity on saving on disk space, they've become the same memory. So that, as I remember it now, at some point in the early 90s, England's greatest ever goalkeeper came into my primary school and showed me how to feed a dead mouse to a python. Like that's what happened. I have a memory of him doing that, even though I know it didn't happen. My favourite childhood memory would be going to Centre Parks, I think. Centre Parks, Sherwood Forest, for the first time. It had only recently opened, I think, in this country, and we went there one summer, and it just blew me away. And to the point where that's where I'd want my ashes scattered.
Wow.
Like, not after this podcast, so I'm hoping to go on for a bit longer, but just a magical time. Sort of self-enclosed wonderland, really.
Is there one particular image that comes to mind?
Well, it would be the rapid.
Moment?
It would be the rapids going down the rapids for the first time. Again, I may be misremembering, but I think as I got out the rapids, Gordon Banks turned up and started handing out salamanders. So,
so finished. So you said private school. So was it quite posh then, the old school?
The school I went to was,
Yeah,
it was,
nice.
Newcastle under Lyme School,
Right.
which is a top school in Staffordshire, and one of the, these days, one of the top 50 in the country, apparently.
Is it really?
My absolute favourite time was sixth form of Newcastle, And my journey to comedy started there when I wrote our sort of assembly and absolutely nailed it. I just did some silly stuff and everyone loved it. And at that point, something happened. There was
A seed was sown.
a seed
yeah.
was sown there in terms
Yeah.
of what I might like to do,
So that then, being at quite a posh school, presumably you were herded into university.
Yeah, it did feel that way. I probably still would go to university, but I wouldn't do it for the same reasons. So I did French at university. I went to Warwick University. I did go on the open days for Oxbridge, but I remember going there, and I was only 17, and the sort of lecturer, the tutor who was giving us the open day at one of these colleges, was saying, well, one finds one spends most of one's time on literature. And I thought, who calls themselves one? Like, where am I? I know I'm wearing a top hat now, but as a 17-year-old, I was interested in Football Manager and things like, and girls. So I decided, at that point, I thought, I'm not applying for Oxbridge. I went to Warwick University and did French.
Did you have to spend a year abroad?
I did. I spent a year in France,
That's handy.
in 2000.
Because if you'd gone to, like, Sweden or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
it'd be rubbish, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I don't think you could do a BA in Swedish. It's kind of,
Not legitimately.
no, not legitimately. Yeah, so I spent a year in France, and that was a bit weird. Because the best thing that can happen to you is that you get mistaken for a native, and that never happened to me, but there was one moment where I thought it had. I had been there about 6 months, and I was fairly fluent at the time. I'm very rusty now, I'd struggle now, but I was in the shop chatting away to the guy behind the counter, and he said, so which part of France are you from? Because it was Arsene Wenger, obviously the former Arsenal manager. He said, which part of France are you from? I got so excited. I thought, brilliant. I am now fully naturalised. I've gone native. I am amazing. I'm like a spy in peacetime. And I said, I'm actually English. Could you not tell? He said, no. I thought you were French, but maybe a moron. Genuine story. I was like, oh, great, thanks.
That's shocking.
ultimate
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, the doing French at university, again, I suppose has helped because what I do is communication. But as far as I can see, the only legacy of doing a 4-year French degree is that occasionally at a party these days, I'll be able to correct someone's pronunciation of a cheese, and that is it. That's it.
I can imagine getting an immense sense of satisfaction out of that, though.
Well, you
Yeah.
would. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if it was like Stilton.
Yeah.
something like that.
Cheddar. It's pronounced
Yeah.
cheddar.
So is anything spiritually sort of happening to you at this time?
That's interesting. So my mum and dad are Christians, and I would always have called myself a Christian. I really became a follower of Jesus at the age of 22, just after university, when I realised that I'd just lost something and really was making life a story about me. I remember being 6 years old, and I had a really bad nervous twitch. Well, I had a series of twitches, actually. I used to shake my head and, blink compulsively and things. And I'd be diagnosed with lots of different things now, but you were just annoying in the 80s. You were just an annoying, a nervous child. But I remember my mum once came in at night because my teacher, Mrs. Jones, had shouted at me because, will you stop shaking your head? Which was fair enough, really, because she was old school. And my mum prayed for me that night. And I remember lying down, I remember feeling incredibly dizzy as she was praying. I was like, Mum, I feel really dizzy. What's going on? She said, oh, that's the Holy Spirit. That's Jesus healing you of this twitch. And as she left the room, I remember thinking, any moment now, I'm going to shake my head. I'm going to cough. I'm going to blink compulsively. And I waited and I waited. I've been waiting for sort of 35 years. So, yeah, that was a very nice spiritual experience of Jesus when I was very young. And my sort of, I think I was always aware of the power and the love of God, and probably had quite a childlike, naive view of what God will and won't do to protect you. So, yeah, spiritually, I was quite smug and quite arrogant and quite sneering of people who were actual Christians. I had this very deep belief in Jesus, but I also probably believed I was his favourite, and I was the cool Christian, but I wasn't. I just had to make decisions about who I wanted to be, and I remember going back to the church that I'd sort of been raised in a little bit. I thought I suppose I need Jesus. Maybe I even would have put it in those ways. So I went back to this church and sat at the back, and I just said, "Okay, well, God, I'm here, and I don't know what happens." And there wasn't really, at that point, there wasn't any real major voice from the sky. But it was, at that time, I said, I am now a Christian. This is my life now. I'm committing to follow Jesus and to be more like him. And actually, from doing that, I then got this idea that maybe my desire to be a comedian isn't random. Maybe it is God-given. Maybe it has been planted in me. And so I thought, I'm going to try and be a comedian, not wanting to even use Christianese there. My heart's desire was to be a comedian. It always had been. And then I started to get some prophetic words from random people about being on stage. Someone said, I had a dream about you last night and you were on stage. And I went to this congregational church, and this old lady put her hand on my shoulder and said, God will give you what he's promised. Yeah, and then I started doing comedy, and I did one gig down in Bath, 23rd of January 2005.
Approximately.
Yeah, approximately. So yeah, 18 years, 2 months and 2 days. Yeah. Exactly. That was some good research.
Is that spot on now?
It was spot on.
Wow.
Yeah, that is spot on. Yeah. And that went very well. And I would say there was a real grace over it. There's been plenty of gigs since where I haven't felt that. But I did way better than I should have done with the material I had. And then I went to watch a gig in Stoke. I went up to the promoter, who's a guy I still know called Wayne Williams. I said, "Hi mate, I'm a comedian. If you're running more gigs, can I get on the bill?" And he said, "Well, as it turns out, mate, like the person who's supposed to be on next is stuck in traffic. He's not turning up. Do you want to go on now?" It's like, no. I did, and I went on, and again I absolutely smashed it. And for me, that was the equivalent of the voice in the clouds. It was God absolutely acting providentially, and absolutely honestly, in the 2,500 gigs since, in the 18 years since, I have never been at a gig where someone has not turned up. It doesn't happen. It's not only uncommon for people to get stuck in traffic and not be there, I've never seen it happen.
Wow. And you write very well, if I may say so, about those early years in your book Stand Up and Deliver, which I enjoyed.
Thank you.
Quite a few years ago now. I certainly remember that and enjoyed it, and you get a great sense of it's a real slog, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just those early, probably even today, it's just a slog.
Post-pandemic, it feels much more similar to the early days than it did. Yeah, I'm having to work a lot harder to get the same amount of money in that I would have done pre-pandemic.
Right.
But yeah, in the early days, I mean, it was fun and exciting, but you're not doing that many gigs. You're probably only doing 1 or 2 a week, and you're only doing 5 to 10 minutes. And what I had in my favour was stage presence. I was confident I had stage presence. I probably didn't have very good material, if I'm honest. Which is why I didn't win any. I won 1 New Act Award. I won Anything for Laughs in 2005, but I didn't win any of the big ones, and with good reason, because I didn't really have any jokes. But yes, it was hard. And then going and doing open spots at the big clubs where you're on the same bill as the top acts, then they're smashing it for 20 minutes. You come on and do 10 minutes. And after 2 minutes, you've used all your good jokes. It's very obvious. And I think probably if I hadn't had that sense of calling, there's several times I would have given up.
Do you ever get a point in the show when you're just about to go on and you think, I don't want to do this?
I think all comedians are confidence players, and it's very difficult to be joyous on stage when you don't have joy in your own life. Because I think on some level an audience knows. Some comedians like Jack D. I mean, Jack D had given up comedy and was doing his last few gigs and had changed his demeanour to be really morose and started doing really well. But I think to be happy and joyous on stage, as I try to be, I mean, that's my on-stage persona. That's difficult when you don't feel like that person. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you mentioned being involved in church leadership and that sort of thing. And so more recently than 18 years, 2 months, 2 days, at least, You have been getting involved in preaching as well.
Yeah. So when I was in church leadership for 2.5 years, I was the evangelist at Redeemer King Church in Chesterfield. I was naturally getting a lot of preaching opportunities and doing that. And I think I was wanting to brand myself as performance evangelist or performance apologist. I just don't really want to do that at the moment. I love preaching, and so if I'm asked to preach, then I'll go and I'll preach, and that's great. But I've always been a comedian, and it's all the same skill set, really. And I wouldn't be able to preach if it hadn't been for my years in comedy. But
did the idea of any sort of ordination ever cloud your sunny sky? Has it yet? I should say.
Initially, that was the toss-up when I was 24. Should I try and go into ministry? But I met up with a guy called Mark Geldard, who was the director of ordinands at Lichfield Diocese, and he said to me, it was brilliant. He said, and again, in my memory, he's smoking a pipe. He probably isn't smoking a pipe in real life.
And stroking
a
salamander.
Yeah. Gordon Banks was there handing out tea. But he said, why shouldn't the gifts that God has given you be the ones he wants you to use? And that really opened my eyes to what ministry could be.
And have you got a home church at the moment?
I go to Newcastle Baptist Church. Yeah. I'm very much the flavour of the day there. I'm the youngest there.
Right, okay.
So I go to Newcastle Baptist Church.
Do you get to? I guess you're quite often away on a Saturday.
I'm quite often away, but I go there because for me it's important to go to church. There's no such thing as unstructured church. I don't want to fall into apostasy and unbelief, and almost invariably when someone comes out of structured church and tries to just live the life on their own, you end up in one followed by the other. I've got plenty of friends who've fallen away from church, fallen away from the faith, or capitulating to the zeitgeist, and I just don't want to be that person. I think the church does have lots of problems, but everyone's got problems. And to quote Gandhi, ironically, you've got to be the change you want to see. If you want to see a church that is humble and sort of able to discuss things and welcoming, well, you do it then. You be that person. Yeah. I think also, though, the pandemic took a huge toll on anyone in ministry. Pastoral work was much harder. For me, preaching over Zoom every other week took its toll. And then when I left Chesterfield, because when you're an evangelist and there's no one, you can't go out on the streets to evangelize, and there wasn't really the role for me then, I felt quite deflated, because we'd been really running a good race as a church, and then to not be there, to not be part of that. But I am probably still a little bit bruised and a little bit wounded from being in church leadership, but who wouldn't say that? I've never known
especially over that period. I mean, it's a perfect storm, wasn't it? I mean, we've spoken obviously to lots of church leaders who've been doing a job for a long time. Never mind just getting involved in it. Yeah. And it was tremendously difficult, and having all the new learning curves and knowing to film in landscape rather than portrait and all those essential parts of building the kingdom. It's been very difficult, hasn't it? But we mentioned the writing briefly, because that's obviously something else you spend some time doing.
Yeah.
Was it last year, Hidden in Plain Sight? Was that your most recent book? I don't want to sound like I'm plugging all your books.
No, I want you to. So Stand Up and Deliver 2011, first year in comedy. Yeah. Gig Delusion 2013, follow-up to Stand Up and Deliver, but it was a novelisation. The Unfortunate Adventures of Tom Hillingthwaite 2014 was a comedy novel about an evangelist. This was before I was an evangelist. I'm really happy with that book. It didn't do very well, it just didn't sell very well. I thought we would get half the Adrian Plass crowd, but we didn't. And I don't really know why, other than when Adrian Plass was writing Sacred Diary, there were only 4 Christian books on the market, and now there's 1 million. But also, I think people thought it was a children's book because of the cartoon cover. Right. But I'm still very happy with that. I thought it was a very good comedy novel for that world. Hidden in Plain Sight was last year, and that was a short book, an attempt to persuade the postmodern mind that the story of Jesus still makes sense historically, emotionally, logically, reasonably, rationally. And then next week, I've got a new book coming out called Curious Tales of Redemption, which is a children's book, 4 short stories for children, because what I want to do is to captivate people with the themes of the gospel, themes of hope and redemption and joy and grief. And I don't think you need to use Bible characters to do that. You know, these are the things that are wired into the universe and our combined experience. So with Harry Potter, for instance, and I mentioned this at Hidden in Plain Sight, I was watching Harry Potter with a friend of mine, and he said, he was not a Christian, and he said, if this was true, maybe I wouldn't be so sad all the time. And it really got me thinking that actually the reason we like Harry Potter, the reason we like fantasy, is because we do believe in a world that we don't see. We are wired to hope for something beyond the natural. And it's not that there really is a place called Hogwarts or there really are hobbits, but, you know, art pierces the veil, doesn't it? And points us towards something transcendental. And music does the same. When you're listening to beautiful music and it's taking you out of yourself towards something else. And the question is, well, what is that something? And that's where theology comes in. Well, maybe it's not just a thing. Maybe it's a person. Maybe ultimate truth is a person who came to find us. So yes, that's with these Curious Tales of Redemption. Then there is a Jesus figure in all of them, but they're not Bible retellings. Again, I want my children, I want my girls, and I want everybody to be able to connect with the gospel in some way. And it's the same with films. We can talk about films when we get onto that. But
So what was the inspiration for that book?
I have been, for the last few years, very sad for lots of reasons. And I think you see that with the true greats. I don't mean I'm a great, but with the true greats, Dostoyevski and Tolstoy and people like that, they're writing from a real place of pain. I think something happens to you in that place that when you come out of it a bit, you can write about that experience. So I would always say, write from your scars, not your wounds. Without the crucifixion, the resurrection has no meaning. If the crucifixion didn't happen, the resurrection is just a bloke coming out of a cave. Where's the meaning in that? The story wired into the heart of the universe is of real death, real grave, and then resurrection in my writing. And you see this in whether they're Christians or not. You see the real redemptive stories are hot on the heels of real death experiences. And again, you see this in the great Russian writers or the existentialists who weren't redemptive, but they were at least created from a place of real pain.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's where the stories came from. It's just writing about stuff that I'd experienced and wanting to make it redemptive.
And that's out next week, you said. So
yeah, it should be out next week.
I guess that will be available, dear listener, when you hear this.
Yes, so Curious Tales of Redemption.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Good, brilliant.
Yeah.
It's if that weren't enough to keep you going. You mentioned obviously you've got a family and a couple of daughters to look after. When you do get a chance to really unwind, what do you like to do? You mentioned football a couple of times.
Well, yeah, I don't play football anymore because I would die. But I like long walks, short stories, old whiskey, and strong coffee. That's what I like. And elongated naps as well. So that's what I do. I watch some TV, but I have to get into a series. I like films. I do like watching films. But short stories for me, both reading and writing, and then that started in the pandemic. When the pandemic hit and lockdown hit, I needed something to feel like I'd achieved something. So reading short stories, well, you've done it. You have completed something. So I just read short stories, really short stories. And then I started, as a result, writing short stories.
Well, that brings us up to the present day, Andy, and in a bit we will take a little look to the future. But before that, it's time to work up an appetite for your fabulous Take-A-Pew dinner party by playing a little game we like to call My Favourite Things.
My favourite things.
Yes, Andy, not one of the most complicated parts of the show. We simply present you with a number of categories, and you just have to tell us your favourite thing in each.
Indeed. And our first category is always your favourite book of the Bible.
Philemon.
Okay. Any particular reason?
It's short. It's short, and it's got that one phrase. It's got two things in it I really like. It says, you, brother, have refreshed the hearts of the saints. So I like the idea that someone's calling us to refresh the hearts of the saints. But there's also that lovely bit where he says, I'm sending him back to you. I'm sending Onesimus back to you. And I know when he was there before, he was useless. But, like, he's not useless now. So do as you're told. Like, again, within those little things of redemption and just acknowledging that he used to be an idiot. But he actually, leopards do change their spots.
No, it is a fun one. I did actually. I sat myself down just this week, and I read the whole of the book of Jude. I was pretty impressed with myself.
Yeah.
It took me nearly 4 minutes.
Yeah, 2 John and 3 John. I can sometimes. Yeah.
They're great. I must say, even the book. I read the Gospel of Mark quite recently in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
It's great.
There we go. Yeah, okay. So, Andy, you obviously spend a fair amount of time on the road, either being funny or spreading the good news.
Yeah.
So here's a category that must be close to your heart. Your favourite motorway services.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It probably... well, I was going to say Gloucester services on the M5, but it closes because it's so fancy and hoity-toity. It closes at like 10 p.m, and that's not helpful for me if I finished a gig at 10:30. I like Corley services.
M6.
M6. Yeah. Because it just...
Welcome break, I believe.
Yeah, so I think it's a welcome break. Yeah. I do like Corley services, and I also like Gloucester, and I also like the T-Bay. Everybody likes T-Bay.
Oh, okay. I've heard of that. I've never been.
Yeah,
It's famous.
It's the fancy. Yeah, it's known for being fancy.
What is it that's for you that sets service station apart?
I also like the one. I think Fleet services on the M3
Oh, yeah.
because it's got
redone.
Yeah, but it's got that look. The wooded. It's got the wooded car
Oh, yeah,
park.
it's quite nice.
Yeah. It's a bit like Centre Parks.
But you've got the drive-through sort of Costa thing on the way out, if you want.
Yes,
to
I like.
There's a log flume there as well. Isn't
Yeah,
there?
there is.
You can take your car down it.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
brilliant. Gordon Banks. You should buy the tickets off Gordon Banks.
It's often there.
I like woodland, so anything with woodland, I think Fleet Services has that. Yeah, I like something where the toilets are close to the entrance. No, you don't. I don't like if you have to go over a bridge or up some stairs to go to the toilet, and then yes, stuff with a burger. If there's a
Burger
no
King.
or a chopsticks, if you can get those, that box of Chinese
they're
noodles.
quite nice.
I like
Yeah,
that.
I like those.
So
Okay.
Beaconsfield's good for that as well.
Right.
Well, you like Cobham services, don't you? You've
I'm
been
a
known to
massive fan.
drive.
Have you been to
Cobham
Cobham
services?
Yeah, always.
We have gone, seriously,
This is true.
my wife and I, on I think 2 occasions, possibly the children as well, have gone to Cobham Services for lunch.
Yeah.
It's not very far from us. It's only like a 6-minute drive. They've got a very nice McDonald's, and I am rather partial to McDonald's.
Yeah.
But and we went there on the way back from a
We did, it was
recent
great.
recording
Yeah.
in Eastbourne, I think, wasn't it? But you go out the back, and there's a little veranda that's
Oh, wow.
overlooking a what's it called? A sustainable,
It's a sustainable urban drainage system.
There we go.
So we have really intellectual conversations about these things. You know?
Well, it's
Yeah,
a duck pond, basically, to you and me. And
Yeah.
it's,
Oxford Services has got
they've
the
got-
nice fountain in the
Oh,
front.
right.
I was going to mention Oxford.
Yeah.
It's very good.
so,
I
yeah,
mean,
I'm a big
there's
fan of
a
Cobham.
good number of
Yeah.
them.
yeah.
And Cobham, I found out recently, yesterday, to be honest, because I was
Edit this
doing some
out, please.
research. No, it's the busiest service station in the UK. Yeah.
Oh wow!
Which I guess it's all the traffic coming over from France and other countries are available,
Yes.
and heading up anywhere else, really, isn't it?
Yeah, very good.
Our third category is always your top 5 films.
Fantastic. Okay, Drive with Ryan Gosling.
I'm
Drive.
trying to think of that one. What's that about?
Nicholas Winding Refn. It's a sort of neon western, sort of spaghetti B movie, but in modern day. It's about this. It's essentially about the Lone Ranger, but in modern day Los Angeles. This guy who drives around. He's a sort of getaway driver, and you've got 20 minutes of his time. Anything happens in that 20 minutes, and he's on it. Anything outside of that, and they're on their own. But it's about this guy, and you never find out his name. He's just the driver, and he falls in love with this woman played by Carey Mulligan, the English actress, and she gets herself into some problems, and he saves her at great personal cost to himself.
Okay. I don't think I've seen that.
It's
actually.
brilliant. It's
check
so
that out.
classy.
Thank you
though.
for the tip.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so
look
classy. So Drive, The Terminator, starring the Terminator.
I have heard of that one.
Yeah. The Shining, Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, yeah.
We
Love
haven't had
that.
that before.
Love
actually.
that.
Interesting.
And all these films, I think, point to the gospel, and so I'm happy to expand on what I mean
Okay,
by that.
interesting.
But and I've tried to get into Kubrick more generally, but I mean, he makes very long films. So I love Space Odyssey as well, 2001, but I've only really watched it in full once because again I don't have time. So Drive, Terminator, The Shining, Last of the Mohicans,
Ooh.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Daniel Day-Lewis. And then what would I also say? Would I probably say No Country for Old Men? Maybe the Coen Brothers.
Okay.
I think.
It's
I'm
not
also
a
going to
British
throw in a newer one which I watched recently, which I thought I was going to hate. called Hostiles with Christian Bale. It's on Netflix, I think. It's a really harrowing story, but it's so redemptive in the end. And again, I like things that display life in a sort of, artistic way, an artistic and sort of stylized version of how things are, but then bring about this redemption. So with Hostiles, Christian Bale plays a cavalry officer in post-Civil War, and he has to escort his old Native American enemy to the reservation. And on the way, he has to, again, save this woman who's had her entire family slaughtered by Native Americans. And so you've got these shaky bonds joining between Christian Bale and his arch nemesis as they both defend themselves and one another from these hostiles. And at the end, pretty much everyone is dead apart from Christian Bale and this woman who lost her family. And a young Indian boy who's had his family slaughtered. So it's quite Shakespearean. It's like a Greek tragedy. Like everyone dies, and it's quite contrived in that sense. But at the end, you've got Christian Bale sending off this woman and boy to safety, and so she's lost her family, but she's going to be the mother of this boy. And then Christian Bale, again, very hard-hearted, very sort of wounded, but in that sort of tacit way that the Victorians weren't able to talk about their real pain. But as the train leaves the station, you just see him stop as he's walking away, and he just steps onto the train. And you see that he's going to go, and they're going to have that blended family. It's going to be him. And I just love that final image. I was just weeping as I saw that, because yes, that's redemption. That's what we mean. Redemption isn't always restoration, but again, there's hope. There's something there. And I love that about Orphan, because Gareth Higgins, in his book How Movies Saved My Soul, says that there's only one meta-narrative wired into the universe, which is God's redemption of the creatures he made a little lower than the angels. So he would say that's the only narrative in existence. And so all films in some way are little subsidiaries of that, tributaries to that. And you see that in a lot of films. People say Die Hard's the best Christmas film. Well, The Terminator is the best Easter film, because The Terminator, if there's no God, if atheism is true, then The Terminator is a true story using fictional characters. You've got this death is coming for you. It knows your name. It's coming for you. Will get you eventually. So how would it be for you if someone stood between you and this Terminator of death and said, "Come with me if you want to live," which is what happened in the Terminator, and that's what the gospel is like. Death doesn't get to win. Again, in Drive, he lays down his life for someone who doesn't even know his name, which again is very Christ-like.
Yes. Well, so the Hostile. So number 6 in your top 5 films. That's good. But I will allow that.
Yeah, thank you.
Because Christian Bale went to my school.
Did he really?
He did, yes. No, it was a few years underneath me.
Yeah.
So to speak, behind me.
Yeah.
So
there we are. I'm happy to, let's get rid of No Country for Old Men, because it's very grim. Let's put Hostiles at number 5.
Okay. Anyway, no, very good. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Right, now our penultimate category, as always, is dedicated to what we call the Great 8. Okay. So 8 quickfire categories that we believe really get to the depths of the human psyche.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So here we go. 8 quickfire categories, starting with your favourite book or author.
Author, Ambrose Bierce.
Okay.
Favourite type of food?
Pizza.
Nice. Favourite TV programme?
At the moment, Narcos, but I'll say The American Office.
Yeah. Favourite sport?
Football.
Yeah.
Okay. Favourite band or artist?
Jamiroquai.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Favourite holiday destination?
Centre Parks.
Of course.
Favourite chocolate bar?
Crunchy.
Oh. Favourite board game?
Probably Risk.
Brilliant game.
Difficult to play Risk with Christians, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because no one wants to attack. We just keep sending in missionaries and aid packages, smuggling Bibles into Irkutsk.
Very nice.
Oh, great.
No, yeah, that was the most quickfire we've had. Very good.
Yeah, I know my stuff.
Very efficiently done.
Know thyself.
Yes. So our final category on my favourite things is always multiple choice. I'll give you 3 possible answers.
This is great.
Okay. And Andy, we're here in the potteries.
Yeah.
So we'd like to know your favourite pot. So here's the 3 possible answers. Fictional hero Harry Potter,
Yeah.
biblical anti-hero Potiphar's wife, or pot noodle.
Harry Potter.
He's had a couple of mentions already.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Pot noodle? You partial
I'm
to a
glad you
pot
didn't say
noodle?
Pol Pot.
That would have been. It would have fitted in with some of your films, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
Same sort of redemptive message.
Oh,
I'm not sure there's any redemptive message in Pol Pot.
No, I don't think so.
So yeah, partial to a pot noodle.
Yeah, occasionally. Yeah.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. Yeah.
Well, I feel we know you so much better now, Andy. And with the whiff of a pot noodle in the air, or at least in my mind, that brings us rather conveniently to the gastronomic highlight of the show, because
It's the fabulous Take a Pew dinner party. The miraculous Take a Pew dinner party. The food is quite irrelevant and some of the guests are odd. It's the impractical, fantastical Take a Pew dinner party.
Yes, Andy, this is your chance to host an impractical, fantastical dinner party. As ever, a quick reminder of how it works. You can have as many friends and family as you would like to be there, but there remain 4 empty chairs.
yes, and you have to fill 3 of those chairs with someone from any time in history, or indeed still going today, a cartoon character, and a non-domesticated animal.
And then on the final chair, there's a gramophone player, which will play the single piece of music of your choice throughout the dinner.
So nothing unusual about any of that, I'm sure you'll agree.
So, Andy, your first choice, the person you would choose from today or yesteryear. And remember, it can't be anyone who appears in the Bible or any of your family.
Okay, I'm going to go. I've mentioned him already, Ambrose Bierce, who is one of the best short story writers of all time. He wrote a collection called Civil War Stories, so he lived through the American Civil War, and just wrote these amazing, terribly harrowing, but fantastic stories. It wouldn't have to be him, it could be any of the Victorian writers, really. I'm just obsessed with Victoriana. So it could be M.R. James or H.G. Wells or H.P. Lovecraft, anyone like that. The novels were still quite new. You had this progress, modernity was coming in, Industrial Revolution and all the advances of that. But you also had the supernatural very prevalent. And so much of that Victorian writing is rationalism versus the supernatural. And I'm obsessed by that. Yeah, I would say Ambrose Bierce.
Okay, Ambrose Bierce. So quite a literary start. And how do you think that we might complement that with a cartoon character?
Well, he'd be confused, wouldn't he? Ambrose would be confused by that. But I think having Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, probably born around the same time as Ambrose Bierce. Yeah. So I'd have Mr. Burns from The Simpsons.
That's quite a controversial choice.
Yeah, I just... He'd have to bring Smithers, obviously, but
Smithers, yes.
He's my favourite character in The Simpsons because he's so horrible. I'm not saying it's going to be a nice dinner party. We've already got a corpse, the corpse of Ambrose Bierce.
Well, I think we'd revive the. We have had to make that clear in the past. It's a fair point. We wouldn't actually be corpses.
Yeah, who would be your ideal dinner guest, dead or alive? Alive.
Yes. Very good. And then that brings us on to the non-domesticated animal.
An otter. I did think initially about a sort of live puma, but people are going to struggle to enjoy themselves. So
They'd be nervous, wouldn't they?
yeah, so we'll have an otter.
You wouldn't be immensely comfortable with an otter at the table either, would you?
No, but you said non-domesticated. Well, I mean, it's as safe as we can get, really.
No, I think an otter would be,
You're an expert. You chuck it in a couple of small fish.
Just small fish and it'll be happy. Then just munch away and
Very
would be
good.
fine.
Very good.
Okay, finally, piece of music that will be playing throughout the dinner.
Yes, well, depending on if I wanted to annoy the guest, it would be Nyan Cat, which is the most annoying tune of all time. But it won't be that. I will say Love Story by Indila. There's a French artist called Indila, and she does a song called Love Story. It sounds like Golden Brown by the Stranglers, but I would have that because I listen to that quite a lot. Or Get Down on It by Kool and the Gang. Again, we'll see what the vibe is once people turn up. But sort of 70s disco funk is my preferred genre.
Okay.
But yeah, for the song, I'll say Love Story by Indila.
That's a very intriguing dinner party.
Absolutely.
I like that. And we hope you get to enjoy such a fabulous dinner
Thank
party
you.
before too long, Andy. And with that, it's time to take a little look into the future as we ask you...
12 years from now. What would you like to be doing? Or would it mainly be the same? Or would you rather be canoeing for summer?
Yeah, it's just an example.
These jingles are great.
Yes, Andy, what would you like us to be talking about if we were having this conversation with you 12 years from now?
I think I'd like to be doing the same thing I've been doing for the last 18 years, but I suppose I'd like to have written more books, and I'd like a couple of them to have really landed sales-wise. Not just do well within my little sphere of influence, but to actually break out. And then I'd like to be... It's interesting because I've only recently changed my mind on this again. When I started doing comedy, I was wanted to be on Live at the Apollo and stuff like that. It sort of got quite close to that probably 8 years ago now. And then sort of, when I got into preaching, when I felt the Lord lead me into preaching and felt God say, if I can say this, I want you to go around the world preaching the gospel. So then I thought, okay, well, I don't want to be on Live at the Apollo. I just want to do this now. But I think I can do both, and actually being really good at comedy and being known for being really good at comedy has always been the thing that's got me preaching opportunities anyway. I think I'm past the stage now where people just see me as the funny guy. I don't feel like an imposter. I don't think people see me as an imposter now, and I teach preaching as I run preaching workshops for people. And so, but I want to be doing comedy, I want to be preaching, and I want to be writing. I want to continue to get better at those things. I want to be more prolific, and I want to make more money from them, really. Or maybe I should say, and I want to build kingdom through those things. And I do want that, but actually, I'm totally honest. My primary aim is to provide a future for my daughters, and also to do stuff that I am creatively happy with in terms of my own integrity. And given that everything I do is about the themes of redemption, that's the way in which I build kingdom.
Still living in Newcastle, do you think?
No.
Angola?
No, not Angola. I would never live abroad. I mean, there's nice little things that I want to... So one of the things I wanted to do at the start of this year was I wanted to smoke a pipe on top of a hill. So I went to the Lake District in January and climbed up the Old Man of Coniston and just smoked my pipe. I was like, done.
Brilliant.
So just little things.
Yeah.
I walked the Pennine Way 2 years ago, so I'd like to walk the West Highland Way and do more walking and things. I have an idea in my mind of where I'd like to be in the country, but that's just for me at the moment.
That's fair enough. Well, we wish you every blessing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wherever life and the Lord may take you.
Yeah.
And that brings us on to the final stretch of motorway on today's show.
Great.
Yeah, very shortly we'll be taking exit 23A, signposted to your spiritual pearl of wisdom. But right now it's time to switch on our hazard warning lights, pull onto the hard shoulder for the part of the show that we call...
Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?
Yes, is it true? And this time we would like your help, Andy, in considering the very nature of God. Or at least the very nationality of God. Because following extensive research by the Oxford University theological think tank Ergo Deplorat Ecclesia, it is suggested that God is in fact Spanish. Now, there's far too much supporting data, frankly, to go through it all here, but obviously we start with Jesus itself being a very Spanish name.
Yeah.
And then no nativity story would be complete without the Angel Gabriel, clearly also Spanish. And it is indeed widely thought in culinary circles that gold, frankincense and myrrh were key ingredients in the traditional paella. And we get glimpses of Spanish undercurrent throughout Scripture. Jonah tries to avoid his mission to the unholy Nineveh by fleeing to Tarshish, in modern Spain most likely, presumably seeing this as a safe, holy place. And of course St. Paul's final missionary journey, his spiritual homecoming perhaps, was to Spain. Interestingly, not referred to in Luke's Chronicles, presumably not wishing to make the Spanish connection too obvious. All of which leads to the suggestion that the extent and depth of Iberian references in Scripture point inescapably to a Spanish creator. So, Andy Kine.
Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?
Is it true? Please help us.
Obviously not.
So you think obviously not?
I would say that
no.
God is not Spanish. If that's
right.
If that's the question, no, I don't think God is
right.
Spanish. No.
No. What if God did have a nationality? What do you think it would be?
Well, yes, I mean, we tend to make him in our own image, don't we? So, and what what I do love is seeing how different cultures sort of approach the Lord. And there's obviously more recently been this whole sort of recapturing of the Jewish Christ and the Jewishness of Jesus. God does have a nationality. He was sort of Palestinian, wasn't he? Like Jesus was.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Jesus is God. So that is the answer.
That's the best answer we get. Actually,
Yeah. I mean, that's the most like. I'm not going to say like, oh, he's obviously English.
I wasn't trying to lead
Did
you
those
into
feet in ancient times? No, they didn't. They absolutely didn't.
Well, you did say to me on the way up, Jesus is the Juan.
Oh, very good.
I mean, I like it. I'm always up for a sort of a good logical argument. I mean, it's always the case. We were taught in sort of A-level English. If you can make a point and back it up with evidence, that's a good argument. And you've done it. So,
sadly, a lot of my evidence in these things is very shaky.
I'm astonished by the amount of research that's gone into that, Ian. That is just amazing.
The idea for this came, by the way, I don't know if you've seen The Chosen.
Bits of it, yeah.
So Jonathan Rumi, who plays an American actor who plays Jesus, and it's great. I think it's a great show, if it's allowed to call it a show. But he sounds inexplicably Spanish.
Yeah,
I don't know why, because he's not Spanish. And he's like, let's go.
Yeah,
it's very strange.
I've been watching Narcos, and a lot of the drug dealers look a bit like you imagine Jesus and the disciples to be. Yeah.
Yes, very interesting.
So we'll say Mediterranean.
Yes.
I think across the board you can't go wrong with that.
Too specific. Well, there we go. Thank you for seeing us straight on that one, Andy. And with that, I'm delighted to confirm that it is indeed time for your spiritual pearl of wisdom.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Fantastic. My spiritual pearl of wisdom is based on the fall and rise of the Apostle Peter. The headline is this: "You are flawed but adored." That's the zinger. The Apostle Peter, we know loads about, and he meets Jesus on a beach when he's fishing, and he goes off and follows Jesus. And Jesus says to him, in Luke 22, Jesus says to him, "Satan has asked to sift you," which is an unbelievable thing to tell somebody. So basically, the root of all evil and corruption in the universe. Well, he knows you by name, and he's approached me as he did with Job, and basically said, "Let me have a run up at this guy. Let me try and take him out." And Jesus says, yes. Jesus, okay. And remember when I said earlier, like, I probably had quite a naive idea of what God will allow you to go through and will and won't protect you from. The sad reality of being a Christian is that the moment you become a Christian, you are thrust into a spiritual war that you're completely unequipped and unarmed for. When I started preaching, someone said, "Oh, you're going to have a target on your back now." I didn't realise that was true, but it, like with hindsight, absolutely has been true. So then Jesus says to Peter, bear in mind, Jesus says about Peter, "I'm going to build my church on you. On this rock," Peter meaning rock, "I'll build my church." So he's an important guy in Jesus' eyes. And Jesus says, if you want to be my disciple, you need to deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me. And Peter does the opposite. He denies his Lord and flees from the cross. So he does the exact opposite. 3 times he's asked whether he knows the person being crucified. And it's his best friend and his Lord and his leader. But 3 times he, with advanced aggressiveness, denies knowing Jesus. So he is a coward. He's a moral failure. He's also a liar, because he'd said to the Lord, "Nothing could happen to you, Lord, and if it does, I'll stay with you." No. So moral failure, coward, liar. On this rock, I'll build my church. Then, and this comes out of the question that people ask me, what is God like? So similar to what is God like? People know what God is like. If you want to know what God is like, this is what God is like. The final chapter of the final gospel, John 21, they're back on the beach. They've gone back to fishing. They're out all night, and they've caught nothing, because at this point he can't even fish for fish. Jesus called him to fish for people. Now he can't even fish for fish. Coward, moral failure, liar, P45. He's rubbish at it. And then Jesus, this is post-resurrection, walks along the beach and says, have you found anything? Have you caught any fish? No, we haven't. then Jesus says, well, have you thought about putting your net on the other side of the boat? So what he doesn't say is you need to get a bigger boat, because that's Jaws. That's not the Gospels. And he doesn't say you need to sail around to the next cove where the water is blue and the fish are plentiful. He says, look, you're exactly where you need to be. Just change your mind, turn around, literally repent, turn around, stay where you are. You're exactly in the right place. And they catch all the fish in the world. And then Peter runs to shore. And Jesus knows exactly what Peter has done. He knows that he was disobedient. He knows that he betrayed him. He knows that he's a coward and a failure. He knows all of that. He knows he's rubbish at fishing. And he doesn't say, oh, look who's turned up. Oh, look who it is. Look who's come crying back. He doesn't give him Stockholm syndrome. He doesn't use passive aggression. He doesn't say trust takes time to rebuild. He doesn't say you need to go through a course of Christian counselling before we can help you. He doesn't say you need to step back from your duties. He says, come and have breakfast on the beach. You want to know what God is like? That's what God is like. He meets the people who've ignored him, betrayed him, walked away from him, failed him, and makes them breakfast on the beach. That's what God is like. And the message is, we are not as good as we think we are, but nor are we ever written off, disqualified or discredited or downgraded by God. We are flawed, but adored.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Thank you very much for that.
You're
Andy.
welcome.
I'd love to be able to let you go at this point, but there is one unfortunate piece of business that remains, and that is the eternal ignominy that is...
Simon's Random Question.
Simon, what's your random question for Andy?
Well, Andy, you're a man clearly well versed in the world of words and writing, so I thought it would only be right to ask you an important question relating to punctuation.
Great.
And that is this. Who would win a game of table tennis between a semicolon and a question mark?
Oh, that's a really good one.
It'd be quite a fierce battle.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Who were in a game of table tennis?
Yeah.
I feel like the 1960s Batman trying to solve a riddle. Table tennis, semicolon. The semicolon wouldn't win because you never know when to use a semicolon.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and so he probably wouldn't turn up. And if he did, he'd be disguised as a comma,
Or he'd be on the wrong side.
Yeah, he'd be on the wrong side. So the semicolon wouldn't win because he would be wrongly administered. But then the question mark wouldn't know whether it had won or not. So we'd have a very open-ended ending, wouldn't we?
That's a much more philosophical answer than the
fantastic.
last. Yes.
Which is why the exclamation mark would win.
Yes.
Ah,
I think because it is basically a baseball bat, isn't it?
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I quite like the idea of inverted commas, which is not an expression you hear very often
No,
these
you
days.
don't.
Good at doubles.
Yeah.
The semicolon is the bane of my life.
Is it?
It's the
I'm
bane of my
surprised.
life.
Yes. Okay.
Because I like you. I do know how to use them, but then people don't tend to use them these days. And so when you write, I only really use them when I'm writing articles because you can be a bit more sort of snobby. But then sometimes I'll use a few semicolons. I'll read through. And I thought, you're so pretentious. And just take it out. Put a full stop. No one cares. I mean, obviously, a semicolon is halfway between a comma and a full stop, which is why you've got the full stop and the comma in there.
It can't make up its mind.
Yeah, it can't make up its mind. But again, it's interesting how writing styles change. If you read again the Victorians, they're constantly using semi-commas. Almost like they were just on sale, and we've got all these stocked in the back. We've got this sort of backlog of semicolons we need to get through before the First World War starts.
Do you have a favourite punctuation mark? I mean, everyone has a favourite punctuation mark.
I like a dash, actually. I do like a dash.
Dash.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is I see a dash as a sort of turning to the audience. I use a dash when I would be turning to the audience.
Okay, yeah, I like that image.
Yes.
Okay. Well, perfect. I think Simon,
We've covered some ground today.
I know we
we?
certainly haven't. I think Simon, that sort of discussion rather invites a question mark over the whole show.
Yeah,
but
it does. Yeah.
in any case, that was
Simon's Random Question.
And so, Andy, you will be pleased to know that rather intellectual punctuation-based debate does indeed provide us with a full stop. We've had a rather marvellous time. Thank you for having us, and thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much. It's been a real joy.
And dear listeners, thank you for listening. And may I say that I'm frankly pretty impressed you've made it this far. Thanks primarily, I'm sure, to Andy's contribution. Do get hold of any of Andy's books. Where can they get hold of the books? Eden.co.uk?
Eden.co.uk, standrewsbookshop.co.uk, and there's stuff on Amazon as well. My website, personal website, if you want it, is andykind.co.uk. On that you will find information about how to book me for gigs. If you're a vicar or a preacher and you want to be better at that, you can find information on the preaching workshops that I run, and also some silly videos of me on stage.
Perfect. I'm sure you'll all be rushing there right now, as will I. Anyway, please do like and subscribe to this show and follow us on InstaFaceTwit to keep up with the Take a Pew news. Thank you. Simon and I will be back with more fun, faith and flights of fancy very soon. But in the meantime, it's Toodle Pip from me.
And Tatty Bye from me.
Join us again next time as we Take a Pew.